1. I'm a uni nursing student, and on top of our own profession's education, we also have to take compulsory language classes, Chinese and English. The tutors teaching these classes were not from our own department, but from the language departments. And boy, the Chinese tutor was awful as fuck. His teaching was nowhere near good, but the worst part is with the assignments and tests where he would give us the work, offering very vague, limiting instructions that didn't help much. When we tried to ask him to be more specific and give clearer instruction, or to give marking rubrics, he never gave straight answers and just tried to dodge it. But after the work was done, he would nitpick every little thing and would grade us very low. We were all very frustrated about it, but had no way to resolve this. One day, the teacher said that we had to take a quiz on translating classical Chinese to modern Chinese. I don't know what good it does to our profession, but okay, since we had learned that in our prior education in high school anyway, so not a big deal. Before, when we learned it in high school, we were taught to translate it word to word, and very literally for the sake of tests and exams. But it was never the only way to translate, as you can also interpret according to meaning rather than to the words, which both ways work. Anyway, we asked the tutor what he would expect, and again he dodged it and only replied, "Just do it your way and it will be okay," and so we did, in our own ways, and in some a malicious compliance way. A few days later, after the quiz took place, we were all informed by our department's head that we had a cheating issue within our class, and stating that academic integrity is held highly, and they have no tolerance towards such things. Turns out that the tutor had accused half of our classmates, around 50-ish people, as cheating, because their works were similar. And all the suspected students were sent to see the department's head for explanations and discuss on disciplinary actions. 2 of my best friends were sent that way, and I was able to hear this hilariously idiotic story. So the tutor accused several students of cheating because their answers looked similar, and the students were confused because the quiz was not that complicated. And what on earth was he expecting out of a simple translation of a small paragraph? Surely there would be a lot of similar usage of wordings here and there. The head was not satisfied with that reason and went on to say that if they had not copied each other, they must have copied it somewhere else on the internet. It was COVID times and we did the quiz on Zoom. Some of the students responded with, yeah, we certainly did some research on the internet, because we were not told not to. And they were completely right, because the tutor never said you're not allowed to. According to the tutor's instructions, they could absolutely do it since it is their way. The head was still not satisfied and said that the students should have put in citations and references if they had done research online. However, the students defended themselves to have done the research with a dictionary, some with multiple different dictionaries, and that is why their wordings were similar. How and why you would cite so many different dictionaries on a simple paragraph translation? Us students have never been asked such stupid things, and clearly the department had no actual idea what was going on. She was just listening to the tutor's side of the story while refusing to believe that the students had not cheated. This argument went back and forth between 50-ish students and the department head for hours, until another department head, a cool guy, decided to intervene and told the students to go home, as he understood and he would try his best to explain the situation to the other department head. Later, as we heard, it was actually not the first time the cheating scenario had happened. The exact same tutor had made similar accusations toward the previous batch of students, on the exact same quiz as well. Somehow it didn't cross his mind that it was his problem, and maybe he should just change the quiz format once and for all. As the tutor received all the backlashes from the false cheating accusation, he was trying to cover his ass and announced that cheatings were interfering with the gradings, and so the quiz result was voided. Now everyone needs to take a new test that didn't involve translating. This pissed everyone off, and the students not accused were angry too at their time being wasted, since none of this would have happened if the tutor had used the new test instead of that buggy translation quiz, and he was trying to shift blame to the students. In the end, he mellowed down and suggested the involved students to take the test in order to redetermine their grades, while others could take the test on their free will. He never brought up the term cheating again. At the end of the term, the language department asked me to do a survey on teaching quality, and I gladly obliged, giving the worst possible score and commenting on how bad the teaching was. The students being accused were actually having a discussion beforehand and agreed to use the dictionary together, as there was no actual guidance given. I guess I should have explained the background, which we were always told to give clear citations and referencing, or else we would be counted as plagiarizing, and it was a serious misconduct that could potentially get us kicked out of school. However, they did not say whether using a dictionary counted into such a case, and the students took advantage of it. 2. I worked for a trucking company. They made sucrose for different food plants in the area. Turkey Hill, Pepsi, etc. My job was to wash the inside of the liquid sucrose trailers so they could be reloaded. This was done by hooking them up to an automated wash system. I drove the lot, picked up an empty trailer, took it to the 2-trailer wash bay building, hooked it up and ran the cycle, then parked the wash trailer in the loading staged area. I was hired as a temp to replace the previous first shift guy who injured his knee. When I was hired, him and a guy who kinda knew the job taught me how to do it. But there was only one official first shift person who knew the job. The other guy just could kinda fumble his way through it. Then there was a second shift guy who knew the job as well. The job required you to be extremely active. You worked in a room that would sometimes seem like it rained from all the steam condensing on the ceiling because you were washing 2 at a time with 190+ degree water for a 20-minute session. I ended up being hired full-time from the temp agency. The company actually bought out my contract because I was doing so well, and the first shift guy ended up retiring due to his injury. About a year later, the second shift guy quits out of nowhere, so they hire a new guy, and now I have to train him. This guy is less than good at the job. I keep telling management that, but you know, they're management. Eventually, he ends up dropping a trailer off the lift truck before putting the lift down, bending the landing gear and doing $11,000 in damage. Anytime there's an accident, they require a drug test. He tested positive for cocaine and was fired. I ended up having to do first and second shift by myself, since I was the only person who knew the job. It wasn't that bad because second shift didn't have as many trailers, so a 10-hour day and I'd usually be done. Eventually, they hired a new guy. Very, very big fellow, and this didn't seem like a fit for him. About 3 months in, the loaders came over, because there's no clean trailers staged. They found him passed out on top of a trailer. They honestly thought he had a heart attack or something, but it turned out he was just drunk, so he got fired. Guess he was back to working both shifts. At first it wasn't too bad. I could get 4 trailers done in an hour, so 32 in an 8-hour shift if I'm busting ass. There was literally no way to do it any faster since there's a 20-minute wash cycle, and you still have to pull 2 trailers in and hook them up. Normally there were about 25 trailers for the first shift and 8 to 10 for the second shift. But then a company that took 5+ dry trailers a shift for first and 3 to 5 for second shift tripled their order for wet trailers due to their on-site processing plant going down. I went from 10-hour days to working 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. for like a month straight in the summer, in a building that got about 10+ degrees hotter than the ambient air was. I kept telling my supervisor, my plant manager, and the company manager that I couldn't keep this up. I kept being told I had to do my job. Do as you're told. Well, one time I worked from 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. Thursday and back in at 5:30 a.m. Friday. That was the day I caused $5,000 in damages. I backed the trailer out without unhooking it first, running the hoses, and pulling a pump off the mounts. So now I had to get drug tested, and since the last 2 guys failed, on the drive there my manager asked me if I was going to fail. I said it depends on what they test for. He said they test for everything. I asked if that included caffeine and exhaustion. He just kinda blankly looked at me and then turned back to the road. Drug test passed, taken back to work. Now I only have 1 wash bay to use due to the damage I caused, and now I have to back into it because it's the first bay that's broken, in a pull-through setup, and maintenance is there repairing it. I ended up being there till almost 1 again. Monday, I come in. having almost fell asleep on the drive. I pulled my manager aside, the plant manager aside, and the owner's son aside. They all said, just gotta do the job I was hired to do what I'm told. They said they're working to find a new person, so I just need to keep doing my trailers. So Tuesday, that's what I did. When I was hired, I was told my schedule was 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., and the trailers in that time slot were mine, along with the first 2 second-shift trailers, if they were there by 2:30 p.m. So I got there at 7, did only the first-shift trailers and second-shift trailers as I was told when I got hired, and clocked out at 3 p.m. I shut my phone off and took my girlfriend to the fair. The next morning, I went in at 7 once again and got to work. The supervisor and plant manager get in at 9, and 9:05 they're in my office. I got escorted to the office of the owner's son, where he proceeded to chew me out for a solid 45 minutes. I just sat there and let him rant. Turns out once I left, my supervisor and plant manager had to do my job. And, you know, since they were supervisors and plant managers, obviously they were trained in the position and knew exactly what to do. They managed to do 4 trailers from 5 p.m. when they realized I left until midnight. This is the same amount I can do in 1 hour. So, once his rant was over, I said, well, clearly you're not going to fire me. He was taken aback. I continued, you have no one who can do my job. You didn't take me seriously when I said I couldn't do it alone, and so I decided I'd show you how important I was. I've got a kid and a life outside this job. The pay is great, but I'm not going to kill myself to get it and put in 90 to 110-hour weeks in the dead of summer. You said 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. when I got hired. That was what I was told, so that's what I did. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me a raise and 3 weeks paid vacation. You're going to let me pick the guy who takes second shift. If you can't find someone willing to take second, I will train them on first and transfer to second when they're fully trained. But I'll get the shift differential on top of my raise if I do that. He looked at me like I just robbed him, but then after a solid 5 minutes, he agreed. See, each trailer that didn't get washed the night before was assessed a late fee by the company who it went to, anywhere from $500 to $5,000. And just last night, I had cost him $21,000 in fees. I think he realized that would quickly be a problem if they had no one to wash any trailers. We ended up pulling over the guy who kinda knew how to do the job from first shift that helped train me when I started there. He took first shift and I went to second. I ended up being the highest paid employee in the wet department. And any department that wasn't management or QC actually, and only 2 years of being there. When there were guys who had been loaders for 15 plus years. I stayed another year or so, but eventually it was more nonsense and I had my fill. 3. So this probably happened around 10 years ago, maybe a bit less than that. I'm living in Europe and I was a uni student at that time. No regular job, so I used to work with some temp job agencies, which used to let me know when any work came up, to see if I'm up for it. Nothing too interesting, most of the time it was a company that had to do a yearly inventory, and needed extra workers to do some repetitive soul-crushing tasks, like counting a number of screws in the bins, and segregating them into said bins based on their type. Quite literally that, to be honest. The main problem was that for small occasions it often lasted only a day or even a couple hours, so the pay was poor at best. But hey, as long as it pays something, it's a step forward for a young student. One time I got a comfortable offer to participate in a preparation for such inventory. And a good aspect of it was that preparation was planned for 2 weeks, as they had quite an extensive stock. And it wasn't just me who was hired, there were probably like 24 of extra little helpers. Boy, we're gonna get rich. For the first few days it was going pretty well. We were usually working in pairs for various departments around the store. Each of those departments had a supervisor or two who, well, supervised our work and gave us tasks. During those first few days, I was working for some nice guys. Same department all the time. And let me digress for a second here. For the purpose of the story, you should know that I pay great attention to detail and am pretty hard-working. So whatever it is I'm doing, I'm always giving my best, even if the task is tedious. And it was no different in this job. However, let's get back to the topic. So I'm working for this department, and after a few hours or so, I asked the guys, the supervisors, if they have anything against me listening to some music on my earphones. They were cool with that, as I was not engaging with any other employees unless I was reporting that I finished a certain task, and I'm ready for the next one. If a customer approached me, I was to direct them to an actual worker from the given department. So that's how a few days went by. Supervisors were happy with the work I did, and I was happy I could make the time fly faster, with the help of my white MP3 player that seems ancient nowadays. Honestly, still after those years, it feels nice to remember daily compliments from those very guys. Good feedback, good guidance, good managerial material might I add now, when I have much more work experience in various roles. But obviously all the good things come to an end, and I started to get transferred between various departments after a few days. We had quite a lot of extra workers, so once the main departments were more or less done with, we were just moved around to help wherever we were needed. And this is where I realized that most of the helpers didn't really bother to work as well as the others. There's been some of us who played ball in the store's alleys, and some were just chilling 15 minutes after every task, since they were so exhausted from all the work they haven't done yet. Well, screw them. I'm just gonna do my thing and keep looking for work. Time flies faster that way anyway, so why wouldn't I? And this is where I meet the shitty supervisor that set the bar for the next few years. This guy clearly was just given too much power, and he liked to remind others that he is the one in charge here, i.e. in his one single department in a huge store. I was working for his department, doing just as good a job as before while listening to music. He didn't seem to mind that. Other helpers often did the same. But what he couldn't stand is that we were idle for even a second, quite literally. We had to be focused on our tasks all the time. And at his department, we had to walk around a lot, so while walking, he expected us to plan ahead our next actions, and evaluate how said action should be performed. I wish I was exaggerating, but sadly I'm not. I had a couple unpleasant remarks from him before, all of them were ridiculous, but still I was trying to work even harder to appease him. But I just had enough when he approached me another time. I was walking between stations in order to pick up some price tags that I needed to stick on the shelves in another part of the department. And while I was walking, I dared to take out my MP3 player to skip a song I didn't like. This is when he went too far and started yelling at me, saying I'm not paid to fuck around and I'm supposed to work. He was kinda aggressive, and we ended up yelling a bit at each other, as I was feeling angry having seen what other helpers were doing compared to me. He said he called me out multiple times and I should just leave if that's my attitude towards his work. So I did. I just turned around, walked to the break room, signed out on the timesheet, and left the store without hesitation. Still, we were only halfway through my employment there, and I was weighing my options after I stormed out. Not showing up at work on the following day would be admitting that I was to blame. Similarly, if I contacted the temp agency or the company trying to sort it out, would feel like I needed to explain myself, even though I didn't believe I did anything wrong. And to top that, I could be blacklisted by the agencies, so no more work for me after the company reports my behavior. So I did what I thought was best. Just showed up for work at 8, as every other day before. As usual, all the helpers formed a neat line in the break room to get their assignments at the beginning of the day, and I was the middle of the line. Assignments were given by another supervisor who was responsible for all the extra helpers brought in through the temp agency. You could tell that all the other helpers were eager to see what they were going to do to me since the news spread yesterday. I expected to be fired on the spot. Honestly, I was just hoping they wouldn't try to fuck with my pay thus far. Anyway, briefing goes on and the supervisor lady gets to me. Stops for a second and clearly hesitates. "Didn't you leave yesterday?" I did as I was told by my department supervisor, but it's not me who has reasons to not show up for work today. I still have a contract for another week, and I'm not planning to abandon it. The lady stood there for a few seconds and just nodded it, gave me my assignment, and carried on with the briefing. For the remaining week, I was working in various departments, but never in the one with the shitty supervisor. Not just that, but I was also assigned to my original department a couple more times, and for some reason, they had even more good things to say about my performance than before. 4. I'm a young person working in a backroom position at a retail store. I've been working there for about a year now. My management when I started was excellent, and as a result I'm very well trained. I never got written up, I'm always on time, and I consistently do things well above my pay grade. I fill in for my supervisor in the back room and can run it myself if need be, and I trained our newest supervisor in her position. If you're wondering, I didn't take the supervisor job because it required changing my shift time. I knew all the fine details and was a team trainer as well. Basically, I was a supervisor but without the pay raise. My managers moved on to greener pastures and their positions were filled by new management. The new management doesn't compare to the quality of the old management. Our store manager, I'll call her Karen, is the worst manager I've had the displeasure of working for. She loves workplace politics, acting snaky and micromanaging everything. When suggesting solutions to problems, Karen would rather take a less effective route just to be the one in charge. When she messes up instead of admitting it, Karen blames anyone but herself and makes it their responsibility to avoid looking dumb. Karen doesn't help when she's needed, rarely does her job, takes personal phone calls all day, and sits in her office on her computer. She is rude, inconsiderate, and incompetent. All in all, Karen is an awful boss. I tried to make peace with Karen at first, but we quickly started bumping heads and our relationship is shaky at best. We're cordial with each other, but Karen wanted me to abandon 100% of my authority while still running the back, which couldn't happen because others come to me for direction a lot. We don't speak to each other when we don't have to. Well, Karen screwed up. One day in the back, we finished with a group activity. Simply put, I had to pee, so once we were done, I told my supervisor I needed a quick bathroom break and headed out to the bathroom. The second I began my business, I got called on the intercom by Karen to come to the back room. I finished up quickly and got back to the stockroom. I was gone about 2 to 5 minutes tops. When I walked in, Karen was immediately interrogating me on where I'd been and what I was doing. I told her I'd gone to the bathroom and she continued asking, like the answer was gonna be different. Eventually, Karen said this absolute gem to me, which she couldn't have known would change the course of our time at this company forever. You need to use company time more wisely and do your job. Okay. Remember how I said I was basically the backup stock supervisor at this institution? My list of self-appointed management duties were actually pretty long. Training new people, fixing damaged items, fixing packaging, training the supervisors, doing paperwork, delegating tasks, giving instructions to people, taking garbage out, cleaning the stockroom, the list goes on and on. When Karen said this to me, something clicked. You see where this is going. I stopped all of it. All the managerial stuff went right out the window. Do my job. Okay, I'll do my job. Not your job, not her job, only mine. That's what you asked, right? Direct your own team, do your own paperwork, train your own supervisors, cause I'm just a lowly wagey, right? Yep, my stockroom fell apart quickly. Suddenly the entire room was in disarray. New people weren't being trained, faulty product was put out. My new supervisor had no idea what to do, other than copy me, so none of the paperwork got done. Garbage stopped being taken. People in the stockroom didn't have direction, the floors were dirty, etc. I wonder why. It was a mess, and management couldn't say anything about it because those were management's duties and not my problem. I know that Karen knew what I did, but all she could do was silently fume about it, suck it up, and actually do her job. She got pissy with me after this and tried giving me less shifts, but that didn't last. Management finally got involved with the stockroom. I've never been so satisfied with myself, all because Karen couldn't accept that I had to pee. What are you gonna do? Fire me for doing my job? Ha! 5. A long time ago, I worked at a poorly managed boutique architectural firm as a drafter. My job included production drawings for home renovations. When I began working there, a coworker instructed me about accounting for my time, using a daily handwritten form listing how long I worked on a project. 4 hours on project X, lunch, 2 hours on project X, 2 hours on project Y, done for the day. We were supposed to turn them in at the end of the week. About 6 months later, I was not enjoying my time there, and it was pretty evident, but I continued doing my job to the best of my abilities. But the owner decided that I was obviously not working hard enough since I was spending too much time on these projects without completing them. She absent-mindedly did not account for the numerous revisions she continuously made, which would often redo work I had just completed. One day, she pulled me into her office and asked me to be more specific on my timesheets to make sure I was not slacking off. She wanted to know what I was working on throughout the day, as working on Project X was no longer sufficiently describing what I did all day. I explained that this is what I was instructed to do, and there didn't appear to be a problem until now. I also confirmed that this was a request specifically for me only. Co-workers continued to account for the time as normal. No problem. I decided to break up my workday into smaller increments of time to comply with her request. I also made sure I no longer stayed early or stayed late off the clock. Here's how my timesheet started to look like. 8 a.m. to 8:06 a.m. 0.1 hours prepare for the day by starting this timesheet, booting up my workstation and greeting co-workers. 8:06 a.m. to 8:12 a.m. 0.1 hours read email about Project X revisions, updated timesheet. 8:12 a.m. to 8:18 a.m. 0.1 hours. Continue reading email about Project X revisions, updated timesheet. 8:18 a.m. to 8:24 a.m. 0.1 hours. Begin working on Sheet 3.x sheet title for Project X, based on revisions provided via email, updated timesheet. 8:24 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. 0.1 hours. Continue working on Sheet 3.x sheet title for Project X, based on revisions provided via email, updated timesheet. Yes, I was accounting for my work in real time in 6-minute intervals. Each entry was carefully handwritten with as much detail as possible. I wanted to make sure she was fully appraised of my work. I made sure to note whenever I received a new revision and whatnot. The entries became longer and longer as I had to specify what I was doing, and it took time to update timesheet for each interval. I had a few entries that contained the 6-minute interval with a description of finished updating previous timesheet entry, since the previous description was so detailed. At the end of the week, I made copies of my timesheets and turned in a booklet of pages stapled for each day and clipped together. I also turned in my 2 weeks' notice. For my last few weeks, I continued to comply but toned it down a notch by accounting for each 6-minute interval, but making the description entries more general, and using a lot of ditto marks underneath repetitive entries. I didn't want to kill the bookkeeper as it wasn't her fault. Luckily, I transitioned into the IT field shortly afterwards. This happened about 15 years ago, and I'm fairly certain that the bookkeeper billed my time as normal, as it was clear when I began and ended working on Project X or Project Y. She just had a lot more pages to sift through for the start and end times. In the grand scheme of things, the project deadlines were shot to hell already as normal, so I don't think anything really changed. I have no idea if the boutique firm closed or not, I just don't care. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 113, and thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then I would appreciate it if you shared it with all your friends and family. Help get the word out there that there's a new video. And if you haven't subscribed already, just click the subscribe button and you'll get more videos in your inbox. And also hit the notification if you want to be more directly informed when videos go live. In theory, that works. In practice, that's somewhat debatable. Okay, this is Thursday, I believe. Yes, it is. This goes up on Thursday. Okay. I have to remember the Eternals movie's out now. I should probably go watch that at some point. I'm a happy Hellfreezer. Well, somewhat happy Hellfreezer today. An audiobook I've been waiting for a few months for. They came out in the US a while back, and for some reason wasn't released worldwide, even though it was written by 2 British people, stars a mostly British cast, and is set in Britain, but still, wasn't released worldwide. Has finally actually been released internationally. I put a tweet out on Twitter saying that the Good Omens full cast audio production, starring David Tennant and Michael Sheen from the Good Omens TV adaptation. So basically, I'm buying Good Omens yet again. I've got the Martin Jarvis version, I've got the radio play they did for the BBC a few years back, and I've got the physical book, so this will be the 4th time buying it. And when I can find the Stephen Briggs audiobook for a decent price, I'll buy that too, because the Stephen Briggs version, while I prefer the Jarvis one, the Briggs version is still quite good, and I would like to own a copy of it. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.